and you can chat. Chats are only seen by the library staff, so you can send in your questions that way. Or if you prefer, you can also use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen as well to ask questions. Depending on what the question is, it may be answered immediately or it may be held for a little bit while we finish a point. And a recording of today's program is going to be available in a couple of days on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch today's program and then refer back to it later, that is always an option. Okay. Today we are going to look at creating a podcast in Adobe Audition. We're going to go over what Audition is, what podcasts are, what equipment would be needed, and then we're going to have a demo in Adobe Audition showing some tools and editing tips that'll be useful when you're creating a podcast. So what is Adobe Audition? Adobe Audition is a professional grade audio editing software that works with both destructive and non-destructive mix and edit environments. And it has different ways to edit your audio, including multitrack and waveform editing. It's an audio editing software. A podcast is a series of episodic digital audio files typically available to the public for listening via the internet. So there are a couple of different forms that can take. It can be an interview where the show's host would have a set list of questions to go through with the person they're interviewing. So you have two different people talking there. It can be just a solo podcast where it's just one person talking to the microphone and thus to all the listeners. There's also conversational or co-hosted podcasts where two or more people make up the typical hosts, and they know each other and they're talking about either different topics that they're interested in or things that they're experts in. A panel is kind of an extension of that, where you just have three or more people discussing topics or whatever the podcast is about. They're all working together to have the conversation about it. There's also nonfiction storytelling, which would be telling something that really happened, but in a narrative way.
We have a question. It says,
yes.
What's destructive and non-destructive?
We're going to be getting to that in just a moment.
Perfect.
Yes. Couple other podcast formats are podcast theater, where a fictional story is being told, sometimes by one person, sometimes with multiple people, acting as if you are just listening to this story, kind of like a radio play. And then repurposed content. So if, say, they have like a video show and they just take that audio and put that out as an audio only podcast, that also is a podcast. So there's a lot of different ways that you can mess with the format of a podcast to make it your own thing. But there are a couple of things you will need to make a podcast. First of all, you need a computer or some sort of machine that can process the audio that you make. Also, you'll need a microphone of some kind, headphones, so you can hear what you're doing while you're editing, especially if you're with other people. Headphones or some other form of audio output equipment like speakers if you're working in your own home. And then some kind of recording software, which is what Adobe Audition is in this particular setup. For microphones, there's a couple of different types that exist. USB mics basically can just be plugged directly into the computer, and they can read the audio that's coming in through the microphone. For analog cord mics, you can use them like the microphone jack, which would just go into your audio input on your computer, or you can use an XLR microphone, which requires a separate box, an audio interface, a mixer board, something like that. You plug the microphone into that, and then you plug that machine into the computer. That gives you greater customization options and flexibility from multiple devices and recording tapes. So the USB mic processes all the audio inside the microphone and then just sends it to the computer, whereas the analog mics just take in the sound and have your computer process it.
Okay, I have another question. It
Yes.
says, is it necessary to have an external microphone? I'm assuming versus the computer microphone, but I might be mistaken.
So if you wanted to, you could use the microphone that comes with your computer or with your phone. The disadvantage of that would probably be that depending on the space you're in, the audio quality may not be as good. Like we've all been on a phone call where it's like really hard to hear somebody just because they're like too far away from the microphone or there's a lot of extra noise happening and it's just harder to manage the audio quality when you have a built-in microphone. So having a separate microphone just lets you, by taking that extra step to have a dedicated audio processing device, lets you get some clearer sound, which if you're trying to put out a product for a podcast, it's helpful to sound a little better. So you're able to. It just might be a good idea to try to get a separate microphone for clarity. There are also two different types of microphones, even aside from the input type, dynamic microphones, which would mostly be used in live settings. They're just picking up audio frequency slightly less often. It's used for getting warm sounding voice recordings. And then condenser mics, which are used in recorded settings and they have a little bit higher frequency, higher quality, and they're used for getting clear and natural sound recordings. So the dynamic mic might be a little bit more soft, but the condenser mic might be more clear. Okay, now I think. And both are cardioid microphones, which means that the direction that you speak at the microphone matters. Highest sensitivity in the front, and then reduced sensitivity in the side and none in the back, which helps if you're like speaking in a room. If it took in the sound from the back as well, it would like bounce off the back wall and come back into the microphone, and it might echo a bit. So the cardioid microphone helps focus where the sound is coming from to help, again, keep things clear. Okay. And then we are going to jump over to Audition, but we are also going to talk about destructive and non-destructive editing first, or as I hop over anyway. And then there's Audition. So with destructive editing, which we mentioned earlier, that refers to editing that makes a permanent change to the audio file. Changes like this are made in the waveform editor, which we're going to mess with in just a moment. This is good. It's good for like noise processing where you like reduce background noise, but it does make a pretty permanent change to the original audio file. And going backwards, undoing that change is pretty difficult. You have to do it in the order that you made the changes. Like hitting the undo button will only go back in the order that you made the changes. Non-destructive editing means that changes can be made on the fly, and then it doesn't change the original audio file, so that any changes that you make can be undone. This, when we get into the multitrack session editor, means that you'll be able to, like if you put some audio over if you put some music over a dialogue track and you're like, oh wait, I don't like that music actually, you're able to just take that music out and put something else in. You didn't change the dialogue file, so that You don't have to like pull that audio out of the dialogue file to put something else in. Did that make sense for answering the destructive versus non-destructive editing question? We will be going into it a little bit as we mess with things in Audition. Are there any questions about what I've talked about so far as we begin this demo?
I'm not seeing anything on my end.
Awesome.
I'll let you know if anything comes up.
Of course. Okay. So we can see the Adobe workspace, right, Zahar?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So this is Adobe Audition. It involves a customizable workspace for arranging these panels. So like we can adjust the size of how all these spaces look so that if we don't want this big box is where the music is going to be. So if we want more space for that, we can adjust the size and make everything how we want it to look. But this is pretty much the default workspace. Some things that are here up at the top, we have the application menu, your file, edit, things like that. Just below it, we have the toolbar. It's grayed out right now because we don't have any audio yet, but it's going to have our basic ways to edit the sound files that we have. Let's see, this big empty box right here is the editor panel. It's where the music is going to go. It's where we're going to be able to see the music that we're working with and make changes to it. On the side here, we have the essential sound panel, which is good for applying effects to different music or speaking audio that we have selected. We have our playback controls at the bottom here. So our pause, our play, rewind, fast forward. This is the record button. Up at the top here, you're able to see if you have more than one file open, you can click on this little hamburger menu and you'd be able to pull up and see all the different files that we have open. And then over here, we have some audio effects that we're able to find and mess with over here. So, and then up here at the top, we have where our audio files will be visible. So the ones that we've imported into the project, we can see. Yes, question.
Perfect. So I have a question. It says, can we record with, for example, an iPhone and then put the recording file in Adobe Audition, or must we record through Adobe from the beginning?
You can do both. So I'm first going to show how to record something new, and then I'll show you how to import a file so that we can have pre-existing recordings as well as recordings that were made with Adobe Audition. So to create a new file for the file, we'll just go to the create a new audio file. We're going to go to the file menu. We're going to hit new. There's a couple of different options here. We are first going to do audio file. We'll get to multi-track session in just a bit. New audio file. Going to give it a name. Let's say it's talking, because that's what I'm going to be doing in it. The sample rate for podcasts is recommended to be this number here. It's 44.1 kilohertz or 44,100 hertz. That's the standard CD quality audio range. Most computers can safely handle this quality without working too hard. Channels is stereo and bit depth is 32. We're going to hit OK. Now we have a new audio file. It's blank. It's got nothing in it. This is the waveform editor. You can see up at the top right corner here that we're in the waveform editor mode. This is the destructive mode that we talked about earlier. So once I make a recording, any changes that I make to it change the audio file. And then once I save, that's how that file is now. Okay, so to record, we first make sure that you have a microphone of some type connected to the computer. If it's usually, if you only have one microphone, it will automatically select it. But if it doesn't, then we can go into the preferences, which is down at the bottom of edit, and we can change audio hardware, and you could pick a different microphone. Got a raised hand. Did we get a question?
Yes, I haven't had the question typed out yet. We are only taking questions either typed out in the chat or in the Q&A box, just a reminder.
Okay. But so we've got our waveform editor set up. We've got this file ready for a recording. I'm going to hit the record button, and then I'm going to keep talking, and we're going to see my voice pop up as a waveform in this waveform editor. So, hello, and welcome to Adobe Audition Podcasting Basics. All right, and now if I hit the play button, it's going to play back what I just recorded. There we go. So this would be the method for recording something originally in Adobe Audition. We're going to save that, file save. Okay. So now we just have that over here. You can also do file save as to change the name if you didn't change it before. Okay, so yeah, once you have recorded something, if you hit the play button, it should play the sound back into the speakers or the headphones that you're using. Again, if the output from Adobe Audition isn't coming into the headphones or speakers that you expect, you can go into the edit, down to preferences, audio hardware, and you can see both the default input, which in this case is the Yeti microphone, and the default output, which is the speakers that you expect them to come out. So that's how you would check and see how the thing you recorded sounds. Okay, so we have saved that file.
And were we able to hear that, like us as the viewers, when you played that back?
Yeah, are we able to hear it when I hit the play button?
Okay, yeah. So I think we're not able to hear the output of that. So I think it's going input to your headset.
It's just going straight to the headphones. Okay. Yeah. Well, rest assured that I can hear it. Okay. I don't know. I guess I can try changing the output and see if that output. I can try this and see if that changes. So this is going to sound really weird to me, but it might work for y'all. Oh, restart the. Were we able to hear that?
We were not.
Okay.
Yeah, I think since the output settings are tailored to our webinar, we're not going to worry about it. Just know that whenever you use it, you'll be able to hear it yourself whenever you have your headphones plugged.
Okay. So yeah. So if we do some audio editing stuff in this program, then I'll describe what the changes were. Okay. So we've created this audio file, and that's great. But a lot of podcasts don't just have the talking part. They have music in the background, or if there's more than one person involved in the podcast, either they both have their own separate microphones to make sure that everyone sounds good, or they're recording in different locations entirely. Like if they were having like a Zoom call while they were recording, and then they send like the raw audio file to whoever's editing it together to make sure that they have good audio on both sides. So in that situation, because changing the audio file by itself would change it forever, what would be more useful and a bit safer is using a multi-track session instead. Because we'll be able to see what that looks like in just a moment. But for a new multi-track, we'll just go to the file menu, hit new, and in this situation, we'll do multi-track session instead. We'll call this a podcast. You make sure that it's saved in the place that you want, and then there's a number of templates for what you want the end settings of the project to be, because you can put different audio files with different settings into the same project, but it wants to know what the final output's going to be. So if we go, the default is none, but we've changed it to podcast, where you have that sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz again, 32-bit depth, and a stereo mix. So we're going to hit OK. And now we can see places for many audio files. Did we have some questions come in?
No, I was just answering it
Gotcha.
in writing. Perfect. But we should be good now.
Okay. So then over here in our files folder on the side, we have the podcast multi-track that we just made, and then the talking audio file that we recorded a second ago. And what we can do is we can click and drag that in, and now that exists in the waveform editor. So if I hit play, it will play the recording that we made earlier. And that's because it's a really short recording and it expects it to be longer than that. It's really zoomed out. This bar at the top here lets you kind of zoom in on the audio file. So you're just focused on the part that you actually need to. So you're not, if you're like cutting different parts of it out, it can be kind of hard to do it if you're that zoomed out. So you can adjust this bar at the top, scroll across, and zoom in. Okay. And then you can also record directly from the multi-track area. Wow, that made sounds for me. I'm sure it didn't make sounds for anyone else. But so if we wanted to record here, where's the arm? One of these buttons has to be pressed to be able to record, but it's not giving me the option. Okay. But I also said that we could import existing audio files. So what we need to do for that is if we go up to this files thing, and we hit this folder, we're able to go into our Windows and find different audio files. So we have this audio, this music track here. I'm gonna hit open. And it sent me over to a waveform for this audio I just imported. But now we have that audio available in this up here as well. And then we're able to, if the Zoom screen would get out of the way. If we look at that hamburger menu from earlier, this little hamburger sign here, you're able to go back to the multi-track session that we were working on. These are the talking audio that I made earlier, the music I just imported, and then this is the multi-track session that we were working on. So we jump back over to here, but we can still see the file for the music over here. And so then if we want to add this music into the podcast as well, we can just, by default, it's named all these different tracks that we're allowed to have. The music one's down here. So we'll just go ahead and drag the music into that one. Why not? And now, because the talking and the music are happening at the same, in the same chunk of vertical space, the talking and the music will happen at the same time when you hit the play button. Drag this back and then hit play, and they both play at the same time. Okay, are there any questions so far?
I haven't received any questions.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to focus primarily on a couple of different effects that you can use to help make your audio a bit more clear. And the first one of that is going to be noise reduction. So what that is, we're going to be doing that back over in the waveform editor. So if we'll go back to talking. So what noise reduction is removing background noise from your recording. In just about every recording space, there's going to be a little bit of just ambient sound, whether that's just the humming of an AC unit, some sort of electronic lightly buzzing or humming, your computer fans, things like that. There's always just a little bit of background noise. And in some situations, depending on where your microphone is or how your soundproofing is in the recording space, it can be kind of distracting. So what we can do is we can remove background noise using the noise reduction tool. So we're going to go to the audio file that we want to have recorded, that we want to remove the noise from. So we're removing my talking because there's just a little background, just air circulation, things like that. And so first we're going to the top left of the workspace. This is okay up here. So up here is the spectral frequency display. We're gonna click on it. We can see kind of where the noise is. It's like a visual representation of the audio that we were working with. So like where I'm talking, you can see that there's a spike of energy, but this area over here, I'm not talking there. That's just the background noise in the space. So what we can do is I've selected this chunk of space here. What we're going to need to do is capture a noise print. We need to tell the computer what the background noise in this space sounds like so it knows what to remove. So we've selected a portion of the recording that has ambient room noise, which is just no talking, just the sound that happens. Then we're going to go with this clip selected, go to Effects, Noise Reduction, and Capture Noise Print. So what this does is it tells the computer, tells Adobe Audition, hey, this sound that I've given you, this is noise. We don't want this. We're going to take this out of the recording. So we hit OK. Now it knows what the sound is. And now we're going to select everything. So I hit Control A to select everything, or you can just drag from one end of the recording to the other. And then to apply the noise reduction, we're going to go to Effects, Noise Reduction again, and then Noise Reduction. Okay. So it's zoomed way out. But you can see here, it's different levels of how loud it is that it wants to remove. This is kind of hard to see like that. Let me try just selecting this chunk. And then effects, noise reduction. Yeah, weird. Okay. I guess it is all pretty low sound, but if you had a wider range of um, things making noise, you could have like an arch here.
And a lot of these,
Mhm.
for now, we're working with kind of smaller samples, but when you're working with podcasts, it will be longer form content and there will be more of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of these changes, they seem really, small or like minuscule, but once you put it all together, it makes the quality of your sound really good. And that's, I think, what the main purpose of Audition to me is make the quality sound really, really good.
Yeah. Just helps make things a little bit crisper, a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to listen to. But we're able to adjust the noise reduction here. Say we want it reduced by 50%, 60%. If you go too high, it can sound kind of robotic. It pulls too much noise out. But if we do 50%, let's see. Maybe I didn't. Hmm. Okay. But yeah. So that pulls the noise out of the sound recording and helps make things more clear. And this is more necessary when you have a less high quality microphone. Um, if you have like a really good recording environment where there just isn't a lot of ambient noise at all, it can be completely unnecessary to need a noise reduction. But especially when people just start getting into podcasting, sometimes they are using their phone recording situation, their phone microphone, and that can have it picks up a lot of extra stuff that you don't necessarily want when you're just trying to get your words to somebody. And so noise reduction can be very helpful there to make it a little bit clearer. Okay. And then there's one other thing that's really useful when you are doing podcasts, especially if you have like a background sound. So we'll go back over to the mixer. And if you look at the amount of how tall this waveform is, helps show you how loud something is. Right now, if I hit the play button, the talking is really quiet compared to the music. You basically can't hear the talking because the music is so loud. And that can be changed by just lowering the volume on a specific track, but it also can be changed with ducking. And what that means is basically it's kind of like if there was a really tall person, like you're trying to take a photo and there's somebody who's really tall in front of the person, someone who needs to be seen. So the person in front ducks down to let what you want to see through. So if the talking isn't quite tall enough to get to be heard, then the the music can duck to become for a moment quieter than the talking while the talking is happening. Okay. We can also make a specific track louder. So we're going to go through both of those two processes. So for first, we're going to try to amplify this talking a little bit to make it louder. Over in the Essentials sound panel over here, this is a dialogue. So we're going to click on dialogue. I want it louder. So we hit loudness and then we hit auto match. So that will help make the dialogue more level with the other existing sounds. That's one quick change that we can do. And then with ducking to make the music quieter against the dialogue. What we do for that is we selected the audio track. This time it's music, so we're going to hit music. And then under these drop downs here, we have ducking. So basically, you're able to adjust these different sensitivities, how much it ducks. You can see this little dotted line here, which shows relative volume where the audio file is. So it's getting quieter while this dialogue is talking to help balance that out and make it easier to hear the dialogue. So if we increase the duck amount, it goes even lower. We can make that music so quiet compared to the talking. And then there's also a fade duration. You can see this little line here, which shows you how fast that fade is happening. Like once you're done talking, if you want it to gradually fade back in, you can slide that all the way over to the right. If you want it to basically be instantaneous, you can just set it to a really low fade duration. That might be a little jarring though, so it's probably best to be somewhere in the middle. And then up at the top, we are picking which type of file to duck it against. It's ducking against that dialogue track. So it's reacting to the dialogue. That's what it wants to be quieter than. If there were multiple music tracks, then you could duck it against other music, against sound effects, ambient clips, things like that. Okay. Are there any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions.
All right. Then one last thing we're going to look at today is exporting the podcast. So they're very similar for both the waveforms and the multitracks, but we'll just run through both of them real quick. Got the talking waveform. We've made that change. We've reduced the noise. So what we'll do is we'll go to File, and we'll hit Export. And then you hit File, and it'll give you this information. You make sure you pick the name that you want, where it's going to save, what format to save it as. If it's something that is going to be released on the internet, you probably want to choose MP3 because that has a little bit less, it takes less file space than a .wav, which is the waveform that it by default saves as. But if you're going to make continual edits towards this, you probably want to save it in the WAV because it retains more data. It means that the file size is a little bit bigger, but it means that there isn't any reduction happening, and it lets you work with the whole sound instead of losing some information. So then we'll hit MP3, and then we don't need to change anything else. We had set it to record at the 44 kilohertz. So everything else looks good. We hit OK. It's being compressed because it's MP3. You hit yes, and then you're done. Very similar with the multi-track session. If we go to File, Export, File, no, multi-track mixdown, because this is a multi-track. And then you want to do the entire session because we don't have anything selected right now. Entire session. Again, you're able to pick MP3 or WAV, and the name, and able to hit OK. So that's for your final product. If you were just saving your progress, like you were going to come back to the multi-track session later, you would just hit File Save. That saves it as the Adobe file that you're able to go back into and continue editing. The export turns it into its final version, which is the MP3 or the WAV. All right.
Okay, there was a question. Okay, two questions.
Mhm.
One says, how do you know, or sorry, how do you choose which part of the music is being reduced? I think this is when you were working on some of the
Mhm.
effects.
So this right now, it is because it's doing the auto ducking. It is taking into account which part of the whole recording is being overlapped by this dialogue file. So what we can do if we click and drag this dialogue, the dialogue file is where that ducking is happening. So you can see that little dotted line, it moved when I moved the dialogue. That's what it is reducing on. And you can see it kind of fades in on the front when it's not at the absolute beginning. Okay.
Okay. And then the next question is, what are the constraints using soundtracks from musical artists? Are there public soundtracks that can be used?
There are, so royalty-free music is probably what you're going to want to search for. What that means is that royalties are basically when you use music, you have to like pay the person who made the music, but royalty-free music is music that is allowed to be used um, for free. So that royalty-free or music in the public domain is stuff that you wouldn't need to be that you would want to use to avoid getting any copyright issues in your final product.
Perfect. And we got one more. Do you get this for free or do you have to pay for this app? I'm assuming it's the Adobe Audition.
Yes, so Adobe Audition is a paid software. So you would need to have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription of some kind to access Adobe Audition. We do have in the library, we have our digital creation spaces, which have multiple computers set up to do to have they have the entire Adobe suite installed. And we also have like microphones that you can borrow and things like that. So you can try it out and see if you actually want to get the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. Um, we also have computers on the public floor that allow you to use Adobe software as well.
Perfect. Thank you. It
Mhm.
looks like that is it for now.
Okay.
If there's any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A thing now.
Mhm. And then okay, got any more questions? We also have book librarian for 30 minutes. And then we have some links that I can post in the chat for some additional uh, support, things like that. Through the library, you also have access to LinkedIn Learning and Udemy, which with your library card, you're able to log in and access basically online classes for the entire Adobe suite, but Adobe Audition in particular here. They have different classes on podcasting, on just general use of the Adobe suite. And then we have a couple of classes that we had found here. So that is a couple of LinkedIn learning classes, and then the Adobe support page for any questions you have while working with Adobe Audition specifically. So we'll leave that in the chat to make sure everyone has time to get those links if they want.
Perfect. And we had one question. I just went ahead and answered it. It
Mhm.
said, where can we use the software in the library? I said, using your library card, you can check out our digital creation spaces. It will have all of the audio equipment and software to create your own podcast. And then we also have the Adobe computers on the public floor as well. I think one at each library.
Yes. Okay. We'll hang out for a little bit more if there's any final questions or so people have time to pull the links out of the chat. All right, guys.
It looks like it might be it.
Thank you guys so much for coming to our program today. Keep on the lookout for more Adobe programs and more virtual programs. We have more coming. We always do.
All right. Thank you for coming.
All right. Bye, everybody.